not all on the same page as regards the meaning of this term. But let me hasten to add that this reluctance, this hesitance around the use of the term feminism is not in any way restricted to us in Southern Africa and Africa. It is a global thing. Indeed, just recently, a poll was done in the US by the Washington Post and the Kaiser Family Foundation. And it found that although 94% of the people that they polled believe that women and men should be equal in every respect, social, political, and economic, 47% were uncomfortable with the use of the term feminist. So and by the way, our own attitude surveys show very similar things. We all agree now that women and men are equal, but are we comfortable with the use of the term feminism? The answer is generally no. So the question then becomes, if feminism means believing in equality of the sexes, and at its most basic, that is the definition of feminism, why are we so uncomfortable with this? There's a saying in English that if you want to hang a dog, you give it a bad name. And so my belief is that many of the people who say they believe in gender equality actually don't. And that is why they have chosen to give feminism this name. And the reason they give is that they associate it with these radical women who burn their bras and so forth, which of course is by and large very far from the truth. It's a myth that has been created in order to give this a bad name. And indeed, we know that in any political struggle, when any sector feels that their power is being thrown into question, they feel threatened. And when they feel threatened, they do some very negative things. Indeed, some of you may have been on a call we had just last Friday to talk about our new Voice and Choice Fund. And for the first time in my life, I experienced online violence with a hacking of that call when some strange character from somewhere burst into the room, started scribbling on my PowerPoint presentation and shouting various profanities. So if ever we needed evidence that misogyny is alive and well, we had it right in our midst on that day. And I hope that doesn't happen to us during this series. But the truth is there is backlash out there, and our struggles are far from being won, regardless of what people say in the formal spaces. So I believe very strongly that part of what we're doing in this series is to reclaim language and to reclaim terms and to charge them with a new meaning. Indeed, if we think back over the last 5-10 years, I think we will all agree that the term feminism has become much more mainstream. In fact, so much so that part of what brings us here today is that the Canadian Global Affairs Canada that funds Women's Voice and Leadership has declared a feminist foreign policy. And indeed, it's a bit ironic that we are part of a fund that is part of a feminist foreign policy. Some of us are still uncomfortable with that term. So part of what we're doing is to understand this term better and hopefully to begin to reclaim that language. Another area we will want to explore during these dialogues is feminism a Western construct? Is it alien to African culture? This is another line of argument that we often hear. And again, it is very often from those who really want to duck the real issue, which is around gender inequality. So our series is structured as follows. Today, we're going to focus quite a bit on what came out of the research with Women's Voice and Leadership. Let me emphasize that this is in no way exclusive to Women's Voice and Leadership. We're just using that as an example within the fraternity of women's rights organizations to kickstart the discussion. And it's wonderful to see partners from all over Southern Africa, indeed further afield. You're most welcome. And please join in this discussion with us. It is not restricted in any way to this grouping, but it has come out of some research from WVL. So we're beginning at home, as it were. However, on the 16th of August, we will broaden the conversation and we'll be talking about African feminism. And we are delighted that we will be joined soon to confirm the panel, but we will be joined by some foremost African feminists to be able to speak on this topic. And our final conversation in August, on the 30th of August, will be around feminist leadership. And there we will broaden the conversation to include our partners in Action Coalition 6 of Generation Equality, just to say that Genderlinks is a civil society co-lead of Action Coalition 6. And on the government side, it is the governments of Canada, Netherlands, and Malawi. And again, we will look for representation from those governments to talk to us about what they understand feminist leadership to be. So it's really a very, very exciting lineup that we have, and we hope that you will stay the course with us and be with us throughout. Let me end my brief remarks with these two quotes from one of the foremost thinkers in this area, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the Nigerian author, whose seminal essay in 2014, "We Should All Be Feminists," also available on YouTube and a TED Talk, and I really, really encourage you to access it. It is a riveting read and a very engaging listen, and very powerful statement around the use of this term and why, indeed, to quote her title, "Why We Should All Be Feminists." She says, "Culture does not make people, people make culture. If it is true that the full humanity of women is not our culture, if it is true that the full humanity of women is not our culture, then we can and must make it our culture." She goes on to say that feminism views people as human beings and aims to tackle the social injustices that silence people's will and power to exceed social expectations. Therefore, becoming a feminist normalizes women's successes and allows men to strive to achieve even more in life. Thank you, Nomti, and over to you.
Thank you, Mekwelin. Now, can you please display the results of our first poll? Do you identify as a feminist? After showing the results of the poll, so we have 86% of the participants identify as a feminist, 2% said they do not identify as a feminist, whilst 12% are unsure. We're hoping that by the end of this dialogue or by the end of the series of dialogues, those who are unsure will be able to identify themselves. Then we have another poll before we call upon Dr. Miranda Weideman, the Global Affairs External Evaluator, to look at feminist identities from the perspective of women's voice and leadership. Terry, can you please show the next poll? So our next poll says, which of the following best describes your organization? Do you identify as a women's rights organization? Do you identify as a feminist organization? Do you identify as an organization that promotes gender equality? Or do you identify as a human rights organization? So Maz, you cannot choose more than one answer. We've made it a single choice. This is to help steer you in the direction which you feel most that you identify your organization as. Okay, whilst that poll is going on, I'm going to ask Dr. Weideman to do her presentation.
Thank you, Nomti.
And sweet presentation, Miranda. And I think we will definitely come back to these questions as we have the discussion taking place. Just a reminder to everybody that is on the call, if you have not already written your name, your organization, your sex, and your country that you come from, please can you kindly do that in the chats? And as you can see, as Miranda was presenting, that the questions where Maz was asking if organizations can have more than one choice, we kind of aligned it to the presentation that Miranda was going to do. And now I'm going to be asking our three panelists, Sis Tenjiwe from Ingema NPO, Sis Zintle from the Great People of South Africa, and Sis Konzile from Polar Organization, to just come on board and just have a conversation with us about the way in which they identify their organizations. So Sis Tenji, maybe let me start with you. How does your organization identify?
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you, Nomthandas, for an opportunity. I hope I can be heard.
Can you do your video if it doesn't disturb your network?
All right, let me check. Okay. I'm not sure. I think my video settings were not on or something.
Yeah, I think we can proceed.
Okay, no problem. I'll just show myself after the presentation so I won't get disturbed. I'm Tenjiwe Ngcobo and I'm from Ingema. As Ingema, we describe ourselves or the organization as a gender equality organization. That's what we actually are more focused on. But personally, as a person, I believe I am a feminist because I serve women and girls while promoting equal rights and enjoyment to everyone, especially to, actually, I'll say to everyone. So we describe ourselves as a gender equality organization simply because we believe that for the well-being of women, for prevention of violence against women, we need to include men and boys. We need to include different gender so that we make sure that women are safer, not today, but even in future. Hence, we have men and boys or other behavioral change programs. That's how we felt that we need to fit into the system, but we describe ourselves as a gender equality focused organization. In summary.
Thank you, Sis Tenji. Zintle? Zintle, are you with us?
Yes, I am here with you. It's so crazy when you log in on Zoom and you're always ready, and when you're about to do magic and then something happens. Okay, but I am here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zintle Kobeni Delanga, based in the Western Cape from the Great People of South Africa organization. So what happens is that we are a women's rights organization. We are a woman-led organization. And we obviously advocate for the protection and promotion of women's rights, young girls, the LGBTQIA+. This includes women that live with disabilities as well. And well, the Great People of South Africa definitely identifies as a feminist organization based on just that fact that we are a woman-led organization. We chanting forward, women's rights, and we are on a journey to dismantle patriarchal ideologies, misogyny, and, just to challenge anti-women policies and create an enabling environment for women's ideas to flourish so that, gender injustice can be eradicated. So we definitely identify as a feminist organization. What we want as an organization, which I think also has helped us to, identify as a feminist organization, is that we want to see women, achieving their dreams and being able to be the best that they can be. We want women to be self-sufficient and safe from violence and human rights abuse. And I think for the past 2 years, we have really taken an inspiration seeing women leading different movements in different countries. And we we identify with those women, and because they themselves are also feminist, you know. So yeah, we definitely identify as a women's rights organization. What I actually want to, when I was informed of this discussion, I actually went back and I actually went back and I thought about the kind of reception that exists, especially on social media, towards feminists. And like Umam Colin was saying earlier, that there is a pushback when it comes to the idea of feminism, which is quite crazy, and it's ridiculous, honestly, because then the people who are actually pushing back is usually men and women who, I believe, still lack the information as to what it is, what is feminism, and how it is that they can also participate, you know, to drive feminist ideas. So it's quite crazy what we see on social media, because I promise you this: the moment there is an opportunity for men and other women to criticize feminism, it is taken with such pride, and I think that is disgusting. You know, they do that, and a lot of feminists face online bullying on social media. And I think I'm actually one of those people, and I thought about this because I experienced that as well. Because then people think, I mean, if you're a feminist, then you are anti-man, then you don't want to, you know, promote men's rights. And that's not what feminists said. We just said that we want, you know, women to be treated equally. We want women to enjoy living in a democratic state, especially here in South Africa. We want women to be free from violence. We want to drive women ideologies or feminist ideologies. That's all we said. So this backlash, honestly speaking, it's just pure nonsense and madness. But yeah, we definitely identify as a feminist organization.
Thank you for that. I hope that our people on the call are starting to understand the way that our grantees are identifying. As you can hear, we have different ways of identifying. And then I'm going to be asking Skonzile to please join us.
Hello. Hi.
Hi,
I'm Skonzile Malinga from Paula. And just to pick up from what Mam Colleen said, as an individual, I would never identify myself as a feminist because of my cultural upbringing and the way feminism has been labeled into something that is radical, that is bad, that is not suitable. But funny enough, when I joined Paula, I'm a psychosocial officer by profession. When I joined Paula is a psychosocial and mental health organization. We focus more on the mental health of women. But the program that we are sponsored by Women Voice Leadership, Courage to Change. Courage is a methodology that brings women together to help them to stand in solidarity in the face of their problems that they face in life, that is mainly GBV and all. And we use a 4-part empowerment model. The first part is to empower within. This is where one is encouraged to have this a sense of self-love, to feel adequate, to increase their confidence, their self-esteem, to believe in themselves, so that they're able to be the person that they want to be, the best person that they can be. And then we also focus on the empowerment with. This is when people come and stand in solidarity with other people during their struggles, especially GBV. Women tend to be recruited into thinking that the abuse that they suffer is mainly due to who they are and how they have believed and how they have challenged cultural and patriarchy norms. So when women come together, they realize that their problems are not only limited to them because of their behavior, but because of a cultural or societal problem. The third part of this model is to empower too. This is about building movements. You know, this is where the feminism that I felt is radical comes in. So we help someone who comes to Paula as a victim to build themselves, to stand in solidarity with others. And then we want to empower them to be part of the movement building. This is bringing about change, helping participants to think about how they promote gender. And in this movement change, we want participants to be direct in their thinking and in their promoting of gender, because they have to think of how they treat their children, how you raise your boy child and your girl child, how you interact within your family, how you interact in the society. So our participants at the end of it, they become champions to talk about the injustices that they go through. So they are what Gender Links calls the drivers of change. These are the so-called feminists that I didn't quite want to associate with. And then at the end, we have the last part is the empower over, where people reclaim their lives, they live the preferred life, envisioning the future. So whilst yes, we are a mental health and a psychosocial organization, I realized that our work is not just to empower them mentally, to help them get over the trauma, but to help them stand against the injustices that they face. Because if they don't do that, then they will remain within that cycle of abuse. So at the end of the courage sessions, we have what we call booster sessions, where we help women to come up with economic ideas, business plans, finance skills, because gender-based violence teaches women to accept to be subhumans, to accept to be below and not reach out to the things that they are capable of. One of the things that are important in our sessions is about the skills, the capabilities of someone, what they envision, what a future without gender-based violence, a future with gender equality means to them, and how they want to promote it right from the grassroots, right up to policy change level. So I think I have learned a lot about feminism, even if as an individual, when I'm filling in forms, I would just think twice. Should I tick feminism? Should I tick women's rights organization? I wonder how we are influencing the women's rights. But I have learned through the work that we do that we are building women to be able to go and stand there in the streets and advocate for change. So yeah, that's my contribution.
Thank you so much, Skhonzile. I really appreciate your honest feedback and your honest assessments. And it goes to Sis Thenjiwe and as well as Zinhle. Thank you so much for having that honest and open conversation with us about the way that you identify in your organizations. Now I'm going to be asking Teresai to please show us the results of the poll that we had, where we were asking you how your organization or how you would describe your organization. Miranda, I hope this will answer some of the questions that you have. So the poll question was, which of the following best describes your organization? So we have at 43%, the organizations that promotes gender equality. 23% of the people that responded said they were feminist organizations, whilst 21% said they are women's rights organizations. They identify as a women's rights organization. And then 13% of the people on our call actually identify as being human rights organizations. Thank you so much for taking part in this poll. Now, we have another poll question that we want to ask, and this is the final question that we have. And that question is saying, who is a feminist? Who is a feminist? Please remember to put your questions in the chat. Don't forget that we will be having a discussion session, so please put your questions in the chat. And as this poll is going on, I'm going to be inviting Tsitsi Fungarani from Global Affairs Canada to just speak to us about what is a feminist foreign policy.
Who is a feminist?
Tsitsi? So I'll go back to our...
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm just trying to see if I can share.
Okay, as you get ready, I'm just going to repeat the poll question is, who is a feminist? Is it women only? Is it men only? Is it women, men, and gender non-confirming people? This is also including the LGBTIA plus community. Or is it only gender non-confirming people? Or are we unsure on who can be a feminist? Tsitsi, you may go ahead whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tsitsi Fungurani. I work for Global Affairs Canada. I'm really delighted to meet all of you and participate in this meeting, in this workshop about feminism and the power of self-identification. I think that in itself is a feminist act of identifying yourself, and that power to identify yourself as who you are. So I'm glad to be participating in this conversation. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to be talking about Canada's feminist foreign policy. Can you see my screen?
It's coming up. I will let, yes,
okay.
You can. Can you do a slideshow? Can you do
can you see it now?
If you can just do a slideshow, yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. So as I said, I'm going to be sharing about Canada's feminist foreign policy. And I'll start from what the issue is and Canada's belief, that advancing gender equality is the most effective way of eradicating poverty. And so Canada has been a long-standing advocate for human rights. And since 2015, Canada has been moving beyond equality outcomes to a feminist approach. And so that is seeking to be transformative and to address systemic inequalities. And I think that shift in itself takes us to be feminist. And you can see that in the italics there in the corner, where it says the feminist approach places a focus on dismantling persistent systemic barriers and discriminatory norms, taking into account intersecting forms of discrimination and exclusion. So at that point, as we identify ourselves as feminists, where we take ourselves from just looking at equality outcomes to dealing with the barriers that prevent gender equality. I think that's where we begin to enter into the arena of being a feminist government or a feminist implementing a feminist foreign policy. And just want to say, as we situate this conversation, that as our ministers take oath, this is also a mandate that they carry, and from our Minister Jolie, that's the mandate to continue to develop and implement Canada's feminist foreign policy with the support of partner organizations. So it is a mandate that the government of Canada takes seriously. And I just want to continue to talk about, the trends that have been over the past 40 years in terms of gender equality, but also talk about the obstacles and why we think a feminist foreign policy would be able to then respond to these gaps that still remain. I won't go into detail, but from political empowerment, from peace and security. So on the left there, I've listed some of the gains that have been happening over the past 40 years. And on the right, I've put in the obstacles there. And you can just compare that we have made great strides, but we still need to even go further. I'll talk about, sexual and gender-based violence, where 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced physical and sexual intimate partner violence or sexual violence by a non-partner, including sexual harassment. And then in 2020, only 55 of married or in-union women aged 15 to 49 made their own decisions regarding sexual and reproductive health rights. So you can see we've made gains on the left side, but there's still gaps that still remain on the issues that I have outlined on the right side. There's issues to do with LGBTIQ, indigenous rights, disability, as well as racism and discrimination. So I won't go into detail, but I was just situating where we come from in terms of what informs us that a feminist foreign policy would be the best way to eradicate poverty. And then I also want to talk about the drivers that are there, or a situation or the opportunities that are there that enable us to advance a feminist foreign policy. And these are issues that have been happening globally and that you can also identify with here in Africa and even in South Africa. I'll talk about the Black Lives Matter. I'll talk about the Me Too movement. And in South Africa, we talk about the total shutdown, Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063 for Africa, and as well as just an awareness of the advantages of gender responsive approaches. We say that advancing gender equality is the smart thing to do because it saves you money because there's the cost, to gender inequality. And also innovative and ambitious partnerships. Colleen briefly talked about generation equality and the advocacy groups that are forming around advancing gender equality. And countries also are really growing in terms of their leadership on gender equality and feminist approaches. I'll talk about the National Strategic Plan for South Africa in terms of ending gender-based violence and femicide. I'll talk about the Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan for South Africa, its procurement policy, where there's a commitment that 40% of procurement into government must come from women. So countries are really advancing in terms of showing their leadership on gender equality. And these are opportunities that we have in advancing Canada's foreign feminist policy. And as I was saying that, other countries are also advancing. It's not really just, Canada that is identifying as having a feminist foreign policy, but you can see other countries as well coming to announce publicly. And then zooming into what we want to achieve as Canada in advancing a feminist foreign policy. We want to reinforce, the objectives of strengthening a rules-based international system to support lasting peace and security and to foster prosperity and to implement the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And how do we want to do that? And as I said, we want to advance human rights, want to dismantle persistent inequalities and address structural barriers that prevent gender equality. And as I said, I think that pushes us as we identify as a feminist government, as we then want to dismantle those barriers. And so what do we do in terms of the implementation of the feminist foreign policy? The approach runs across our international policies, programs, initiatives, diplomacy, trade, security, and development. You are familiar with, I think, our Feminist International Assistance Policy, which we say most of the times, but also it includes trade, diversification. It also includes our defense policy, as well as the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security that Canada is implementing. And now it's on its second National Action Plan. And you know, last week I was in a conversation with some countries from SADC, and they were questioning why they should develop a National Action Plan, yet they are not in conflict and they are not in war. And you know, a country like Canada, where there is considerable peace, but they're on their second National Action Plan. And to say that developing one is also a preventive measure. You wouldn't want to develop a plan when you're in crisis already. And then I want to take you down to some of the initiatives, signature initiatives that we're advancing as the feminist foreign policy. I won't go through all of them, but you know, some of them, the LC Initiative for Women in Peace Operations. We also include inclusive provisions in free trade agreements, and then the global trade and gender agreements that have been signed recently include, you know, provisions for gender equality. And I want to talk more about the corporate actions that Canada takes in terms of what we do in terms of advancing our foreign feminist foreign policy. And the GBA plus that we apply to programs and policies. And those that have implemented programs such as gender links would know that this is an area where we place a great emphasis. And why we say gender-based analysis plus is we're not just analyzing relations between men and women, we're also analyzing relations between populations, because we understand that, you know, women are not a homogeneous group in themselves. Us, in having this conversation, we may enjoy privileges and power that other women in other circumstances do not enjoy. So in our programs and policies, we encourage that we look at those intersections, and that our programs respond to those that are most marginalized. And then in doing that, we also want to advance to have an approach that is evidence-based, and to disaggregate the data that we generate so that we are able to address the root causes. Because if you do not have data, you will not be able to respond adequately to those intersecting identities. And also internally, you know, our senior leadership, our head of missions, in the appointments, the feminist foreign policy is also applied adequately. Staffing and selection processes are also taking into consideration the feminist foreign policy, as well as training for staff. And this is mandatory for all staff to train on conscious and unconscious bias, so that when we then implement or when we present programming internationally, we are aware of our biases unconsciously, and the unconscious and the conscious biases that we have, and we try to address them. And then, so I want to zoom in on the feminist international assistance policy, and I'm saying feminist foreign policy in action, where there are six action areas that I won't go into detail, but including human dignity. There's also growth that works for everyone, inclusive governance, and one that is core, or that one that runs across, is gender equality and women empowerment. And through under FIAP, we have prioritized investments that have the greatest potential to close gender gaps and to eliminate barriers And as a result, we are one of the donors that are aiming, ranked high in terms of supporting gender equality. And in the year 2021 to 2022, 99% of Canada's international development assistance has been targeted at gender equality results. And through our gender marker, from a gender equality 1 to a gender equality 3 marker, we are aiming at gender equality results. And we also want to track those through our key performance indicators that we track year on year in the programs that we implement. And also supporting a comprehensive sexual and reproductive health rights, and to address inequalities in terms of unpaid and paid care work, and to strengthen women's rights and feminist movements. And through this, we've been able to support 900 women's rights organizations under the Women's Voice and Leadership, which some of you have been supported through and administered by Gender Links in South Africa, as well as the Equality Fund. We've also talked about our commitment and the global alliance that we're building under the Generation Equality Forum. I've talked about the LC initiative as well as the trade agreements that we have since 2017 that have mainstreamed gender. And above all as well, there are also trade missions and services that are supporting Indigenous women, women-owned SMEs, Black entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, and I would point out the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, where we want to see that women also benefit, and those that are most marginalized benefit from it. And then in terms of further developing the policy, because it is a green document that continues to be reviewed in terms of taking in feedback. And there have been a dialogue that has been initiated from 2020 to 2021, where the response was very enthusiastic, trying to see what we can do in terms of further developing Canada's feminist foreign policy. And I will just take this quote from Minister Joly that says, the feminist foreign policy is not a brand or a label. It is a lens that we apply in order to support gender equality, peace, and prosperity globally. So it is a lens with which we see the world, and which we think would be able to respond adequately in terms of eradicating poverty and reaching those that are most marginalized. I won't go into detail in this, but this is from some of the issues that the stakeholders that we were listening to were saying, that there needs to be policy coherence, and that the policy needs to be non-partisan, and that we need to be accountable as feminists, and we need to fund civil society, and we need to be able to monitor the progress that we are making through the feminist foreign policy. And so in conclusion, I just want to say that as we celebrate the progress that has been made, we also want to be mindful of the backlash against advancing gender equality and women's rights, against LGBTIQ rights, against sexual and reproductive health rights, and discrimination that still persists, even in Canada as well. It's not a gender equal society, so it is also still fighting for gender equality. And in South Africa, bringing it closer to home, gender-based violence and femicide still persists. So, we have made progress, but we still need to be mindful that there's still work that needs to be done. We talk of COVID-19 and how it has affected women and girls globally. And we know that it has really just followed the inequality features that have been there widening them and deepening them. And that has made us to recognize, the long overdue issue of undervalued paid and unpaid care work. And this has been a key priority for the government of Canada. And so for this and other reasons, I would say the time is ripe for reinvigorating feminist leadership and action towards human rights, towards gender equality, towards inclusion, respect, and diversity in all the work that we do so that we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Titi, for just giving us a glimpse and a spotlight into the feminist foreign policy that you have at Global Affairs Canada. And what I've picked up from your conversation, which actually needs to be something that could be rolled out to a lot of other governments, is that feminist oath that is taken and the training that you have internally of looking at feminism with a non-biased lens and being aware of when you walk into situations. So please, just a reminder, if you have not already done so, to put your names in the chat and where you come from and your sex and your age, as well as your comments and questions. I am taking down and putting them in a PowerPoint, the comments and the questions. And we will have a discussion in just a few minutes. But before we go there, we have had our colleague Susan Tolme draft us a very interesting feminism policy discussion paper. So Susan, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Let me put my camera on just to say hello to everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Nancy. It's so great to be part of this conversation. I think it's long overdue, and I think everyone talking honestly about what it means to them really helps us understand what some of the challenges are in terms of people identifying as feminists. I am sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to take up too much time because I think that this is such an exciting conversation that we should be having. So I'm just going to briefly discuss or point you to the discussion paper, point you to some of the issues that have been raised in the discussion paper to hopefully further engage us. We've put it up on the website, on the WBL website, and we invite everyone to take a look at it and to post comments. It's a working document, and it's really just been prepared to open up the conversation. So the dictionary, and I think we've heard a fair amount of this, and Miranda's right, the meaning of feminism has changed, and I'll speak a little bit more to that, but it's the belief and aim that women should have the same rights and opportunities as men, or the struggle to achieve the same. So feminism is a movement that has been, that has been around for a long time. I think Miranda alluded to this as well, and Titi, women are not homogenous, so feminist is not homogenous, and there are different forms. And the paper sort of takes you through some of the waves and how feminism has changed over time, how it was, originally organized around the right to vote. It moved into the 60s and 70s, where it probably got its bad name from, where the alleged bra burning incident occurred, which was covered in the media at the time, mostly run by men. So it really is about, deriding women for having the audacity to speak out against injustice. The third wave started grappling a little bit more around intersectionality, which has become mainstream in the feminist movement. And then we have begun to be in the fourth wave of feminism. But there are critiques around feminism throughout the waves. There's criticism around the fact that it's white feminism or Western feminism, and it ignores the unique struggles of women of color, and it also marginalizes non-white feminist knowledge and ideas. So some feminist ideas are considered radical and contrary to African culture and traditions, which we've heard already. And also Western feminists weren't focused on the bread and butter issues affecting African women. Again, like feminism in general, African feminism is complex. African women are not homogenous. Different women in different parts of Africa will have different issues that they are fighting for. And people think that, or people say, feminism is un-African, but as an interest group, it can be traced back to the early 20th century. And we have our own Charlotte Maqete, who founded the ANC, or the Bantu Women's League in South Africa. In Africa, feminism also stems from the liberation struggles. And women fought alongside men for racial justice, for state autonomy, and women's rights. So we have a number of feminist icons, African feminist icons. They may not have identified as such at the time, but the work that they were doing and the struggle for gender justice really makes them feminist. So the paper will take you through different phases of feminism. So we heard a little bit about radical feminism. Sometimes it's seen as too radical for some more traditional African women, just in terms of sex worker movements, the LGBTQ movement. And some conservative African feminists would, that goes against what they believe is African culture. And so the Afrocentric feminism really looks at the un-Africanness and Westernization of feminism and how it conflicts with Western and African ideals. And then grassroots feminism has grown out of over the 60s, between 70s and 80s. And those are really focusing on the bread and butter issues of African women. Feminism evolves. So today we could be looking at three different types of feminism, and these aren't cast in stone. These are again open for discussion. You have liberal African feminism, millennial fourth wave African feminism, and then Afropolitan feminism, which really speaks to women in the diaspora who live in Europe and America. We also talk, and I would love to hear from other young women in this call about how important it is for young women to be involved in the movement and to identify as feminists. Africa has the youngest population in the world, representing 60% of Africa's population, but we have the oldest leaders. So there's a growing recognition that young women should be playing, and youth in general should be playing a much stronger role in governance and political decision making. And feminism is also it's a political choice. Young women are tech savvy, and as we've seen, and in the fourth wave, we've really moved to digital and online activism, and we've seen that through the hashtags, the fees must fall, my dress, my choice, the Me Too movement, etc. So people often ask whether men can be feminists. And the short answer is yes. They may not use the term, and some, you know, feminists may say that they don't have the right to use the term because they haven't been marginalized in the same way as women have, but they do subscribe to the same ideals. There's also, when we talk about feminism and when we talk about women's rights work in Africa, there's the issue of involving men always comes up. So there's increasing consensus that men have to be involved in the struggle for women's rights. As the beneficiaries of and those who uphold patriarchy, men have to be brought along, and they need to be engaged at all levels. In the household, in the public sphere, in traditional and cultural spaces. And then what does a feminist man look like? I mean, these are just my ideas. Maybe, you know, others will have more, but it's men who understand their privilege and the ways in which their behavior and actions perpetuate their dominance. They work alongside women, not on behalf of women. So they're not co-opting the work of women, because there's also the fear that men, you know, are coming in to be benevolent and to, you know, work on behalf of women rather than working as allies. It's important that they, as often as the culture, there was a term yesterday that I heard, but as the gatekeepers, let's say, of culture and tradition, that they vehemently oppose harmful practices. And then one of the things that I think men often don't do is when they hear sexism, sexist jokes, they don't call it out, and that also is one way that men can show that they are supporting feminists. Quickly, why we still need feminism, I think it's already been alluded to. We are living in a time where there is significant pushback against the gains that we've made over the last centuries. Our struggle for political, social, economic, and climate justice are very far from over. And just one example of this backlash and this rolling back of rights is the recent US decision to overturn an almost 50-year constitutional decision that women are allowed to have abortion in the US. And it might seem like it's a problem for the US, but it's a problem it's something that will reverberate across the world, especially in Africa, where we still have such high levels of maternal mortality, many of which are a result of unsafe abortion. So women are still underrepresented in almost all spheres of society. There's still unacceptably high levels of sexual and gender-based violence, and women are still not able to realize their bodily autonomy and to make choices for themselves. So when people say, well, why do we still need feminism? There are many, many reasons. These are just a couple of the reasons. But we can think in our work every day why we need feminism. So also to quote something from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, she says, okay, feminism is about social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. It demands an annihilation of the gender hierarchy and is not about women's rule over men, as is often misinterpreted. While weighed down by negative interpretations, the term feminism recognizes that for centuries, a specific group, women, have been and continue to be oppressed and othered. So that's for me why we should all be feminists. I think there's reason still as we go forward. So as I said at the beginning, there is a discussion paper out. It's on the WBL website. There's also an op-ed that I wrote on the topic as part of our Women's Month celebration, which is again my opinion. So read that if you would like. And then some of the questions for discussion. And I think that this, speaks a little bit to what Marinda was saying as well. Is the discomfort or the rejection of the term feminism, is it about ideological differences, or is it a matter of language? And is feminism un-African? And if so, if people say yes, why? What does feminism look like in South Africa? Where do we sit on the spectrum? Because in the paper, I look at the African woman feminism spectrum, because, as I said, it's not homogenous, and there may be more conservative or more radical feminists. If not the term feminism, then what? I think that we should be reclaiming the word. I think we should be shouting it from the rooftops. But if it is an alienating term, as it has been described at, what would be a more acceptable term? And what does feminism look like in the future? So those are the questions for discussion. There are many more. I hope you're able to take a look at the discussion paper online, and please give comments. It's a working document, and I'm sure it'll benefit from the rich input that everyone on this call will make. Thanks, Nomti.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that interesting input into this discussion that we're having. And I think that it has probably made some of us feel a little bit uneasy when it comes to the term feminism and how we identify ourselves as feminists, or whether we still don't identify ourselves as feminists. So Tari, I'd like you to share the results of the last call. And if anybody has a question, please put it in the chat so that we can have our short discussion. So as you can see, the results, who is a feminist? We still have 20% of the people in the chat, in the Zoom meeting, that believe that only women can be feminists. And it would be interesting to actually get reasons as to why these people believe that only women can be feminists. You can send us a message directly if you want to remain anonymous, or you can post your message in the chat as to why you believe only women can be feminists. And also we have 77% of the participants said that women, men, and gender non-conforming people can be feminists, whereas we have 3%, and thank you so much for your honesty, from the 3% of the people that said that they are unsure as to who can be a feminist or who is a feminist. Thank you so much for taking part in this poll and for sharing your results with us. And I have just made a quick slideshow of the questions that we are being asked. So I hope you can see my screen. Let me just make it bigger. Okay, let me just try and make it bigger just quickly. So do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Please go into the chat and ask your questions, or share your comments. You can even put a hand up to share your comments. So far, this is what I've captured, where Professor Glenda was saying, she was asking the question, what was the percentage of people who felt uncomfortable with the term feminist? I think that has been responded to, Professor. I believe Marinda did answer that question. And then Zintle said, 100% they don't believe in the freedom of women because they are threatened by power and independent women. I don't know, Zintle, what you were referring to when it came to that. And our GL chair, Kubeshni Govinda, was saying, she was asking some very important questions, saying that she's very curious to know what belief systems underpin the fear or the refusal to identify with feminism. And when did we first come into awareness of these beliefs? And these beliefs, do these beliefs make sense to you? So if there's anybody who would like to take a stab at answering these questions, please just raise your hand and you will be acknowledged, or put in the chat box and you will be acknowledged. And then Professor Glenda was saying that she's from WITS, which is her organization that she works for. And she's saying as much as she can identify as a feminist, I can't answer that. The organization would say the same thing. Hence, I said that it supports gender equality. Thank you so much, Professor Glenda, for that honesty that you have shared with us. And then we had another interesting question, which is very linked to what Titi was speaking about at the end of the discussion, where they were saying the issue of unpaid care work. And we got a question where we were being asked, how best can it be addressed in a patriarchal society where women are not allowed to participate in the mainstream economy? So I can't see anybody right now, but please feel free to put your hand. May my colleagues please assist me?
It's trying to, but I don't know if I can manage this anymore. We have a hand up, Nomti from Skonzile Malinga.
Okay, please, Sko, you can go ahead. Sko, you can go ahead. Okay, seems like it's not happening. Sko, we can see your hand is up, but I'm looking at your screen and I can, oh, now, there you go. Now you can, yeah, please go ahead. Okay, it seems like Sko's having difficulties with her. Sko, I think you're having difficulties with your microphone. Okay. Ongeziwe Lulibo from the Luluba project says, one of the challenges with including male identifying persons in feminist programs is whether they will filter the principle to their circles. Prime example is in an economy like South Africa, where the majority of men partake in cultural practices and so forth. Would they be able to implement these principles in the staunch cultural areas and that are very patriarchal? It's very thought-provoking. Ongeziwe, it's very thought-provoking. Is there anybody who would like to put a contribution to say something during this last few minutes that we have? Ketsiwe Dlamini says, is non-conforming gender as a term and concept an oxymoron in a feminist sense? If gender is a social construct, then who is in a position to judge what is in compliance and or conforms? Conforming to which standard? Perhaps I'm not a feminist. I think as two ideas within feminism are equality of sexes and the right to freedom of choice. Okay, Colleen, I think there's a direct question here for you.
I've just answered it in the chat.
Okay.
And
right.
Chipasha Mwansa has
yes.
his or her hand up? Yeah, not sure.
Please go ahead, Chipancha.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this. It has really been an informative session. I've learned a lot. I've also been given a lot to ponder on.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to add my voice to Ongeziwe's, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Ongeziwe's point where they're saying that male identifying persons in feminist programming is a bit problematic. Also, just to say that in naming ourselves as feminists is political. The term feminism is political. And if people have a problem with it, there lies the issue in itself. Why should people identifying as feminists be a problem? So I do not believe that men can be feminists. I believe they can be allies. They are friends. They are comrades. So they can offer solidarity, but they cannot be feminists in as far as feminism itself goes, as an ideology, as a lifestyle, because they are people, whether they intend for it or not, by virtue of being male or identifying as male, benefit from the patriarchy, especially. So feminism came up as a result of the oppressive patriarchal society systems that favor men. So the people then that benefit from this system cannot turn around and say they can and are feminists, because they cannot and will never understand the struggles that feminists and women face and have faced for so long. So while we have so many people in the movement, men who want to claim feminism, they cannot really be feminists. I constantly say this in different spaces. They are allies, they are friends, but they cannot really be feminists. And naming ourselves feminists, calling ourselves feminists is political. And that is why we should continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very thought-provoking. Do we have any more comments, questions that you'd like to put to the room? What I like about this is the fact that we are going to be able to take this discussion further when we go into African feminism, which is what Susan has already kind of highlighted for our next dialogue, is that we'll be speaking about African feminism. And I'm liking the inputs that we are getting and the questions that we're getting, because it's going to assist us in framing the next coming discussion. So we have 2 more minutes. If you really have your last input and you want to share, please feel free to do and share your last input.
Hello?
Yes.
Sorry, host, to come in through the audio. I couldn't find where to leave my hand.
Okay, who's speaking?
Donald Mutsengerere from Contact Family Counseling Center in Zimbabwe.
Okay, welcome, Donald. Please share your thoughts.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to respond to the previous speaker. I assume it's Chipasa Mwansa. Okay, no, she was saying it's probably impossible to bring men in as feminists, but then I want to give a testimony that I am a feminist. For the past 4 or 5 years, I've been working around the issues to do with women empowerment and making sure that the voice of women and girls is heard. And recently we have been working on this, the He for She Solidarity Movement, originally launched by the UN Women. And we have actually committed as champions, gender-based violence champions. And we have changed the country profile. Quite a lot is happening. And I'm one of the young men in the country who are actually advancing the rights of women and girls. And I would say it really has been a great experience, in as much as she claimed that men would never understand the struggles of women, but I do. And on behalf of other men I work with, yes, we really do. And it's not going to end here. We still do it even at home. So it's not really kind of a professional thing. It actually is a part of us, kind of a sixth sense that we've adopted in our lives, to say women and girls have to have fair opportunities to access whatever it is that they need and representation, etc. So I would say there are men out there who really are committed to promoting the rights of women and girls and actually eradicating gender-based violence in so many ways. In as much as it can be insignificant in some way, but like I said, me and other guys are working flat out on that. So yes, of course, it's possible. It is for representation. Actually, we have had traditional leaders in a number of districts and wards in the country, especially in Matabele and South, who actually have committed to the He for She. We've seen a number of pastors coming in, empowering their wives economically, giving them capital to start their own businesses. That is as a result of the He for She. So we have men in communities who have really taken the empowering women and girls, and we've seen a lot of results. I just wanted to challenge her to say she shouldn't lose hope. There are men out there like we can change the world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Donald. And I think this is very interesting, and I'm appreciative of the honesty that Chipasha and yourself are having. And this is so good to lead us into our next conversation, where we're actually looking at African feminism. And if you could please just also drop me, Donald and Chipasha, if you could drop me your email addresses, maybe we can have a conversation, and for the dialogues going forward, we can actually look at ways and how we can incorporate the two and maybe have a little panel discussion on that. That would be very interesting. And thank you so much to everybody for being a part of this dialogue. I'm going to be asking you to switch on your videos so that I can take a few pictures. And so please remember that all the resources will be available on our website, on the WVL website. We've posted that on the chat. But if you've missed it, it's www.wvlsa.org.za. So can everybody just switch on their videos? Oh, I can see you beautiful people. Let me just, I'll take the first group. Okay. Now I need to move on to page 2. Page 2, please switch on your videos. I can only see a few people. Okay. Yeah, and then just to say, thank you so much for being a part of our dialogue today as we were demystifying feminism, and we look forward to the dialogue on the 16th of August on African feminism. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you and well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you and bye.
Okay, I think we can give it 2 more minutes, Tari, and then we can end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the email address. Great.
I'm going to stop recording now.